Attorney General William Barr is now weighing in on the stunning decision by the Justice Department to drop the case against Michael Flynn. Now, the decision comes after President Trump's former national security advisor fought criminal charges for months. Flynn pleaded guilty twice to lying to the FBI about his Russian contacts during the presidential transition in 2016 and 2017. Critics argue the move undermines Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Barr spoke to Catherine Herridge about the controversial move in a rare interview.
A crime cannot be established here. They did not have a basis for a counterintelligence investigation against Flynn at that stage.
Does the fact remain that he lied?
Well, people sometimes plead to things that turn out not to be crimes.
What should Americans take away from your actions in the Flynn case today?
I want to make sure that we restore confidence in the system. There's only one standard of justice.
And Catherine Herridge is with us now to talk more about this. Catherine, so what evidence justifies this action from Attorney General Barr and the department to reverse General Flynn's criminal case? Because as we mentioned, General Flynn pleaded guilty twice.
Well, that's right, Vlad. This seems to have come out of the blue, but if you've been tracking this story as we have at CBS News, it's really been building for several weeks. Earlier this year, Attorney General Bill Barr tasked a U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Missouri, Jeff Jensen, to do a review of the Flynn criminal case and to specifically look at whether all of the documents that should be provided to the defense as part of their what they call the Brady obligations had been done. And in the process of doing that review, Jensen, who spent about a decade at the Bureau and then a decade as a prosecutor, found a number of records from January of 2017. And that date matters because that's the month General Flynn was interviewed by the FBI about his conversations with the Russian ambassador during the presidential transition. And what they found in those records is that by late December 2016, early January 2017, the FBI had made a decision to close their counterintelligence case on General Flynn, citing a lack of derogatory information. But then at the 11th hour, this controversial FBI agent, Peter Strzok, intervened to keep the case open. And the Attorney General makes the legal argument both to CBS News and then also in the new court filing that there wasn't a legitimate investigation ongoing into Flynn at that time when the FBI went out and interviewed him about those phone calls. And the Attorney General also made the point that the FBI already had the transcripts of the calls, so they knew on its face whether he had broken any laws or stepped outside the boundaries. The Attorney General said he did not believe that was the case in the phone calls, so the point of the interview was to sort of trip him up in the end. And as you rightly point out, Flynn pled guilty ultimately to lying to the FBI about the contents of those conversations.
So, Catherine, you asked William Barr about his intentions surrounding this decision. I want to play a little bit of that sound.
Are you doing the president's bidding?
No, I'm doing the law's bidding.
You know you're going to take a lot of incoming, as they say in the military, for this decision.
I'm prepared for that. But I also think it's sad that nowadays these partisan feelings are so strong that people have lost any sense of justice.
So, as we all know, the Justice Department works for the United States, not for the president or the presidential or for the White House in any way. So I'm curious about the timing of this release, because it certainly seems to undermine, to a certain degree, Robert Mueller's investigation.
Well, the Flynn prosecution and those ultimate guilty pleas were kind of like the crown jewel in the special counsel Robert Mueller investigation. And I think you can argue that General Flynn was really the most senior Trump official who got caught up in the Russia investigation. So I think you make a very fair point there, Anne-Marie. Number two, on the timing, the reason this all came to a head now is that the government had a strict deadline in the Flynn case to file a number of motions. So they were up against the clock, which is why they made the filing in recent days and not, a month or a couple of weeks down the line. And their motion was to dismiss on the basis that the interview of Flynn was unjustified and it was not tied to a legitimate investigative case.
So, Catherine, as you've reported and others, none of the documents these documents that have been released appear to undercut the central allegation, which is that General Flynn misled the FBI. Do I understand that correctly?
The documents that have come to light, Vlad, give us sort of the scope of events in January of 2017 and the decision-making by the FBI as to whether they had enough information to leave the investigation of General Flynn open. And at the beginning of January, a decision was made to close that investigation. And the only reason Agent Strzok was able to intervene at the last minute is that it had not been closed when they were instructed. So it moved slowly, basically. The bureaucracy moves slowly. So that's number one. Number two, if I was going to ask a follow-up question in that interview, now that I've had a chance to really look at it, I would have pressed the Attorney General at least one last time on the issue of whether Flynn lied or not, because there is a statute called 18 U.S.C. 1001, which makes it a crime to lie to federal agents. And my interpretation of the interview is that there was not a legitimate investigation. That's the position of the Justice Department. Therefore, the lie was not material to an investigation. But what I might have asked him is, let's put all of that to one side. The fact that he lied to an agent or admitted that he had lied to an agent, wasn't that enough to really push forward with the prosecution?
And Catherine, as you... Sorry, Emery.
Go ahead, Vlad, because I know you sort of had a part to your question.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, Catherine, as you know, the president has weighed in on this, offering his congratulations on Twitter, saying, quote, dirty cops and crooked politicians do not go well together. We've also had reaction from former FBI Director James Comey. I want to play a little bit of that.
Who at the FBI was driving this?
Well, this particular episode, it looks like the impetus came from the 7th floor.
The 7th floor is Director Comey.
I believe it's Director Comey and the deputy's office.
Based on the evidence that you have seen, did senior FBI officials conspire to throw out the National Security Advisor?
Well, as I said, this is a particular episode, and it has some troubling features to it, as we've discussed. But I think, that's a question that really has to await an analysis of all the different episodes that occurred through the summer of 2016 and the first several months of the President Trump's administration.
What are the consequences for these individuals?
Well, I don't want to, we're in the middle of looking at all of this, John Durham's investigation, and the U.S. Attorney Jensen, I'm going to ask him to do some more work on different items as well. And I'm going to wait till all the evidence is and I get their recommendations as to what they found and how serious it is. But if we were to find wrongdoing in the sense of any criminal act, obviously we would follow through on that. But again, just because something may even stink to high heaven and appear everyone to be bad, we still have to apply the right standard and be convinced that there's a violation of a criminal statute and that we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. The same standard applies to everybody.
So, Catherine, obviously, you there talking to the Attorney General about James Comey, and Mr. Comey has responded on Twitter. I don't know if it was before or after your interview, but this is what he said on Twitter. The DOJ has lost its way, but career people, please stay because America needs you. The country is hungry for honest, competent leadership. Those are the words of the former FBI Director, James Comey. We've also had reaction from members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat. The president has sort of made this a rallying call, Catherine. And so it does, for some of these Democrats, it does feel as if the Justice Department has become politicized. But when you asked the Attorney General about how history will see him or view him, he gave you sort of a coy response about history essentially being written by the winners.
That's right. So I would just add that since our interview and since the motion yesterday, the former deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, has also issued a statement, and he would be one of these senior executives that Attorney General Barr appeared to be referring to. And he said the decision to question General Flynn, then National Security Advisor to the President, about these phone calls, he said was absolutely legitimate because they were looking at the Russia collusion issue and any kind of significant contacts between senior people in the Trump campaign or the Trump transition, and then also the Russian ambassador and other Russian officials. So I just wanted sort of to put that on the table as well. When you look at these issues, one of the central questions is whether the activity that took place in January of 2017 and then into the early period of the Trump administration, as the Attorney General said, and I think he's kind of giving us a wink or a tip here, it may look bad or smell bad, but that doesn't mean it's criminal activity, right? I think that was a very important phrase there. But again, it shows us, based on the response we've seen from Republicans and Democrats, how deeply divisive this issue is and how politicized decisions of the Justice Department have become. The Attorney General told CBS News that he's trying to take the politics out of this by following the letter of the law. And in this case, he felt the evidence did not support this prosecution and there was not a legitimate investigation that was open at that time. Legal scholars will debate whether that is information which they think is fair or it's not fair. But ultimately, the judge is going to have a say in this, and that's the wild card that we're still waiting for.
Catherine, before I let you go, you expect Republicans to take one side and Democrats to take another side on this issue. And I don't know if we'll ever hear Robert Mueller himself weigh in on it. But the prosecutors working on this case that spent like 2 years working on this case, I'm wondering if they've expressed any opinion on this final decision. They would have looked at all the notes. They would have come to a conclusion. And I presume that if they thought there were red flags there, they would have spoken up as well.
I know I don't want to get inside the minds of people who were on these teams. I just try and sort of stay trained on the facts of what happened here. And one of the important issues that's really come, I think, out to the fore really is that when you are interviewed by the FBI, especially if you're a senior person at the White House, there's a real procedure in place. You know how government works. There's a real procedure to doing that. And it involves notifying the general counsel of the White House, and then you coordinate how that will go, what legal representation will be there. But in the Flynn case, and the former FBI director, James Comey, has sort of joked about this publicly, they did an end run around everything because things were so chaotic. And they just went directly to Flynn and said, we got some questions we want you to answer. And he said, okay, come on down. So a lot of the regular procedures were not followed. Now, people will have to make up their own minds as to whether that was something that was politically motivated, it was bad judgment, or it was just the decision-making at the time to get to the truth, and there was some urgency to do that.
Really interesting stuff, Catherine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.